Yo, what's up, everybody? I got one of my favorite people at LinkedIn. I actually spoke to him prior to me even starting in the role. So super excited to introduce you guys, the one and only Andy Linder. Woo!
Thanks, Davidson. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to share with everyone and the community, a lot of your tips for success. Like, from the outside, obviously, like I haven't gotten to like hang out with you as much because you left New York to move to Chicago for your mid market account executive role. But yeah, would love to kind of pick your brain on what's made you so successful so far in your career and life and all the things outside of LinkedIn itself. It seems like you're up to a lot. And yeah, like why don't we start by you sharing a little bit, more about your personal mission statement?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Davidson. Obviously, honored that you thought of me for the podcast, video cast, whatever we're calling it. So again, my name's Andy Linder. I've been with LinkedIn for about 3.5 years now, a little bit more. Started here after graduating from Northwestern University outside of Chicago. Moved to San Francisco for 2 years as part of our new grad rotational program. Did sales development there, and then moved to New York in 2018 in May for my AE1 role or SMB account executive role, and then to Chicago this past July 2019 for my mid-market account executive role. And it goes back actually to why I'm at LinkedIn in general. And it was my sales development manager who actually forced me. He said, Andy, you are not allowed to be on my team without a personal mission statement. And I knew that I cared a lot about the college to early career trajectory, and knowing that there can be a huge gap for students to not only understand what they want to do with their lives. Who of us knows that? I still don't know that 3.5 years into my career, but really what skills they bring to the table. So for me, my personal mission statement is to transform the way that students acquire jobs, internships, and other career and educational opportunities through LinkedIn and beyond. Hence why I'm an account executive for LinkedIn Learning, is to better understand from typically HR leaders what skills are required by their workforce now and in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think everyone should have a mission statement, a personal mission statement. Actually, I didn't, I've like have never really thought about it until I hired my first like life coach. I think that was like four years ago. I just saw like someone post on Facebook. They're like, hey, I've just started becoming a life coach. Would anyone love like any sample sessions? Like, and I was like, sure, why not? But like I feel like not everyone has a mission statement, so that's a really good call to action. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, right. We're starting off with a lot of value already, man. That's just the Linder way, man. That's just how you roll.
Yeah,
Okay, so to go back to, so obviously, and you hit your quota for the year already, right?
I did. Blood, sweat, and tears, but we made it.
Yeah, so let's dig in a little bit deeper into that. Obviously, like it's not common that people hit their quota like this early on in the year. And would you share like a little bit more about, because like I guess like some people that maybe like don't know you as well, or people that are outside of sales, they might be like, oh, like man, these sales guys, they make all this money, like would you share like a little bit like
Trying.
more about what it takes to be a consistent top sales performer over the last 3 years or so?
Yeah, well, no, appreciate that, Davidson. And I don't want anyone to think that it's only February and we're on a calendar year. So LinkedIn and Microsoft, we're on a July to June fiscal year. So it's only a couple months in advance that I
A
was
couple months.
fortunate to hit my annual number. But I think it's a couple things. I mean, I've been in the same business at LinkedIn since I started in sales development, which is LinkedIn Learning, same business as Davidson. So I think it goes back to my SD role, where prospecting and partnering now with my SD, but formerly with my account executives, plays such an integral part of how I set up my business from day one. So back in July, when I first got my book of business of about 500 accounts, I knew I had to go through each and every one of those accounts to better understand the ins and outs of them before I actually prospected them. So what I would do is I would check our sales force to see if people had been talking to these companies in the past, looking at close disengaged, or I know other companies call it close loss ops on those accounts, and truly going into Sales Navigator, which shameless plug is one of our other products at LinkedIn, is to see if there are any decision makers that I know off the bat could be really good fits to talk with. And from there, prioritizing them and organizing them in an A, B, C, D format. And from there, once I did that, it took a couple weeks. So I use typically a slow month of July when people aren't usually buying things, everyone's on vacation, to set up my year. Where from there, I didn't have to look at yes, obviously I'm looking at my book every day, but not nearly as in depth as those 10 to 15 hours up front where I went through literally every account that I had to get insights that will now prepare me to execute on that prioritization and that prospecting for the following 12 months.
Yeah, so it sounds like you do a lot of the front end work, and you're very like strategic with your time and your where you choose to put your energy in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. Hopefully, I was a journalism major. So I think even just taking time to prioritize quality over quantity has helped me even since my sales development role. And as an account executive the last 2 years, I think that's really helped me as well, is to be super thoughtful, get in the weeds with my prospects, not only understand their HR problem that I need to solve or their learning and development problem, but the business impact whenever I can. Sometimes it's hard, but whenever you can tie what you're selling to, what's ultimately going to help those three different levels of pain, even getting to the personal pain, can be really helpful to accelerate deal cycles and actually create urgency in a business that sometimes, as we've found in LinkedIn Learning, doesn't have a sense of urgency for some people.
That's a good common theme. I have noticed that a lot of the top reps talk about personal pain. Definitely not a coincidence. There were, yeah, so that's interesting. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, what we found, maybe just what I found, is the fact that a lot of HR professionals don't necessarily have a seat at the table, at the executive table, is what I mean. So at the end of the day, they may not know how to make their mark with the executives, how to get promoted, because usually if you're thinking about BANT in sales, budget, authority, need, timeline, when I've spoken with HR leaders, especially in the beginning when I first started, I said, oh, I'm talking to a VP of HR. They have to have authority. Like, I can check that box. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, that is not true. They have to get buy-in from not only the rest of the C-suite, but from department heads, from the individual employees themselves, because their ultimate role at the company is to serve their employees and to make their employees better. So what I try to weave into all of my calls with different accounts is from the beginning, like, I want to make you look good. I want you to be able to say, like, this was my project. I want to put a stamp on this. And it's the only product at LinkedIn that everyone at a company can use. So it's not just for marketers. It's not just for salespeople. It's not just for HR professionals, but everyone has the opportunity to learn. So it's my responsibility to empower those HR leaders and get at what is driving them to be there, or why they haven't gotten approval for a learning platform, let's say for the last few years at the company, to actually say, okay, here are the reasons that LinkedIn Learning makes sense for me. These are the reasons that it makes sense for the company, and ultimately for the organization to move forward and be their champion and have them drive the deal at the end of the day.
So you did mention a good point where, I mean, it sounds like the goal is, after having conversations with you, you're empowering them to have a seat at the business table, essentially, right?
Correct.
So it sounds like, you have like pretty good relationships with your prospects. Like, one of the things I feel like, just in general, like, people have trouble, is like just time management and when to move on and when to, like, so what advice would you give to people that are struggling with, like, which deals should I keep on top of, and when should I move on, and like, hey, like I don't think I should invest as
Yeah.
much time into this?
Out of luck. Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think it's sort of the $1 million question in sales in general, probably.
Yeah.
Is yeah, when to know, does this person, truly want this thing and it's just a matter of time or budget or whatever it is, or are they stringing me along or whatever the persona is? I think for me, what I try to do is pressure test them from the beginning. Like some people in the LinkedIn Learning org, at least here, say, and they exaggerate a little bit, but they say, "Oh, Andy doesn't do a demo with a client," and partially that's true. I never usually say that the next step after a discovery call, after my first call, is a demo. I try to get them to a trial period as much as possible, as often as possible, because in my thought is if they're not willing to test our product for free, they're never going to buy. They're never going to spend money for their employees, even if it's just a trial for themselves and a couple other HR professionals in their department. Like I'm always happy to do an initial trial period with them to make sure it makes sense, and then try to get at least 10% of the workforce after that to test the product for 2 weeks. And I'll say, we can do this trial whenever you want, you tell me, but once we do it, and I will be here to hold your hand and execute on what we're looking to accomplish with the trial, we're going to make a decision at the conclusion of that. We'll get all the feedback. We'll make sure all the employees are taken care of. And I'm going to be the one reaching out to them, God knows. But that by the end of it, we need to have that decision. So they agree with me most of the time. They'll say, I get that, Andy. Like, I know you're going to be spending the time and effort up front to help us with this trial. So let's push this out 3 months. And I say, you know what, that's totally fine. Now I know that I don't need to put as much time and energy into that one because I know that they're not ready to try the product for free. If it's later in the deal cycle where they're stringing me along and I can sort of get a sense that something's up or they don't have enough authority or I didn't do a good enough job, like getting pain or budget or whatever it is, at the end of the day, I think all of us at LinkedIn, made it here for a reason, and we all know how to do sales. Like, I don't think anyone here is necessarily a better communicator than the next person and is going to be able to get more deals on average than the person sitting next to us. But I think at the end of the day, it's about that effort where you might be able to go back to prospecting your book instead of sending that fifth check-in email over a month-long span, and find a deal that's ready to go, ready for that trial, ready to implement if and when that trial goes well. So I think it's obviously easier said than done, but at the end of the day, if I can figure that out and know, all right, something's up here, I'm not getting an answer, I'm moving on from that person typically.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, and I feel like you do so much, like even outside of LinkedIn too, right? So
I try. Staying busy.
yeah, so I guess like, I'm sure there's people that like go up to you and they're like, "Oh, that's funny." I know that always happens to me. It's
Yeah, the
hilarious.
lights just flapping like a bird. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's just funny. It's funny because every LinkedIn employee can relate. We're just like, "Yep, that happens." In the middle of client calls, yep, it does happen.
Yep, exactly.
No, I was gonna ask you like I feel like a lot of people always ask like, how does he do it? Like, how does he have the time to do everything, right? So I guess like what advice would you give to people that maybe, they see what you're doing and they're kind of like, I don't get it. Like how can I how do I have the energy or how do I do everything that you're doing? I'm sure. Do you
Yeah.
get that question sometimes?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, especially here in Chicago where I live alone, I need to keep myself busy or else I'll go crazy. And I do like my alone time, typically Friday nights. I'll fall asleep by 8:30 because I just have nothing left in the tank from the week. But usually, I mean, I don't do that much, I would say, outside of LinkedIn. Like I've done rec dodgeball in every city that I've lived, San Francisco, New York, Chicago. Excited to finally be here for a full summer where I can do some volleyball, hopefully this summer, out on the beach. Why not? Lake Michigan. And then one of the groups that I was involved with in college, I'm one of the heads of the alumni board here in Chicago, truly because I love startups, and it's a consulting group that's dedicated to helping Israeli entrepreneurs with their projects. And so being Jewish, being like a proud Israel fan, I guess you could say. Like I really enjoy that and being with like-minded professionals here in Chicago and doing that. So that's really just fun for me. At the end of the day, I'm definitely an extrovert and like get excited about those things. But
Hmm.
even at LinkedIn, when I meet new people, I always try to make sure that I know when I'm going to get my work done. Everyone says, "Oh, Andy works overtime, like more hours than the average person," which is probably true within our limits. But at the end of the day, sometimes I'll go from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. with no calls and I'll just do coffee chats instead. But I know that I'm going to get in at 7 a.m. instead of 8 and get some work done for that first hour of the day or stay until 6:30 as opposed to leaving at 5. So on average, I probably work around the same amount of hours, but just sometimes different depending on, knowing that some people that I only get to see during work hours at LinkedIn over coffee, that I make sure that I make time for that.
Hmm. It seems like you and Jordan are both pretty good about making time for that one-on-one chats. And you guys are both, I feel like, pretty good about like just like the balancing out the networking, but obviously like being a top performer. Um, like I guess like how did you have mentors or like how did you kind of figure out that like yeah, I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like not everyone like comes into LinkedIn and they kind of know what to do, but it just seems like you guys kind of know what to do in terms of like I don't know, you're doing all the right things. It's like it's kind of like I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
Truthfully, I mean, there's definitely a component of the fake it till you make it type mentality. I think at the end of the day, I can think back to at each step, how people have mentored me to get to where I want to be and like better understanding how they conduct their business. Like I'm still very close with one of my AEs that I supported while I was in sales development. His name is TJ, and I'm about 5'9". Pretty scrawny Jewish kid, but he's like 6'8", 300 pounds, covered in tattoos, like a rock star in all ways from Southern California in Santa Barbara. And I learned more from him probably than a lot of people. And he's quiet and I'm not. So it's really interesting, but I've learned how to be able to give a lot of energy towards like the deals that I'm working on and personalize, et cetera. But to not be afraid to stand up for myself and to believe in our product and to know if people truly want this thing, they will let us know. And if I don't spend all those hours coming up with check-in emails, like that's probably going to be fine. And like to stick to prospecting, he was always that person who said, Andy, I trust what you're doing. Like I want you on demos. I want you in negotiation calls, like to learn that up front. So I was just very blessed with that. And then I've even had somebody like my current manager, Jason in Chicago, whom I would visit college friends in Chicago from time to time. And he always said, Andy, even though he was an AE, he said, I want to mentor you. Even though you're not here, even though you're not my SD, like I want to develop you into a salesperson and a leader. And I had never heard of the word sales or tech sales before graduating from college. So I really didn't know what I was in for. But LinkedIn was the first place where somebody told me, Andy, you're amazing, besides for my close friends and family. And that's why I still wear a LinkedIn shirt to bed every night because I care about
Do
this
you
place.
really?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh my
they're just
god,
comfortable.
that's
They're very
awesome.
comfortable shirts.
Like
And
every night, like there's not one night that you don't wear a LinkedIn shirt.
not one night. Yeah. I mean, I rotate usually among 6 different shirts throughout
Nice,
the week. And then, yeah, make sure I wash them over the weekends and then you start the
cool.
cycle again.
That's
So, no.
awesome. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So, so what do you think comes first? Like, is it the chicken before the egg, right? Like, how do you become a good mentee, right? Because obviously you're attracting these amazing people that just want to like take you under their wing. So,
Yeah.
I definitely don't think that's a coincidence. Like, how does one become mentorable? If that
Yeah.
is even a word.
I think at the end of the day, it's actually one of my friends who doesn't work at LinkedIn who gave me this advice when I was still in college. And I always said, like, Michael, you only have a couple of friends that I hear you talk about. And I said, you could be, it's such a popular guy. Like, you could be friends with anyone. He said, at the end of the day, I want every friend and mentor, person that I have in my life to add something different. And that's sort of the approach that I've taken at LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm always open to helping anyone here. I love this place. Like, I have no intention of leaving LinkedIn anytime soon. But I want to make sure that every mentor that I have, like I need to understand for myself and do the research on that person or that discovery. Thinking of it as a sales conversation, like to understand what they can bring to me and to make sure that I can bring something to them in return. But that it's specific and actionable, and knowing, sort of what that thing is at the end of the day, where I know I'm going to grow from that. So I think that if you can do that research up front and not just put a coffee chat on the calendar just to talk with somebody and to be
Mm,
thoughtful about it. And again, even if it's just something that you admire about them on their LinkedIn profile that has nothing to do with you, but just asking to learn more about that, like that is a better lead in than just saying, oh, you know what? This person's really cool. I want to get to know them, but without sort of anything else besides that.
mm. No, that's helpful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so I definitely wanted to like, because I do think like anyone who's listening to this can learn from you, whether or not they are in sales or not. Um, but like, I think one of the positive, I think anyone could attest this, but that, anytime your name gets mentioned, people always say like you have positive energy, right? Like what does that mean? I think you alluded to a lot of it, but like, how would you describe like, just being that person where like people just want to be around you, or people, you know what I mean? Like that takes like, yeah, why don't
Thank
you
you, Dave.
elaborate on how you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, that's really nice. So I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, like I really just want to put myself in situations where I feel like I can bring my full self, whether it's at work, whether it's with my friends. Like people will make fun of me for, only getting very fruity, sweet drinks at a team event. Like I'm not
Hmm.
going to be the guy to get a beer because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like one, it's more enjoyable for me, and two, I
Yeah.
can make fun of myself for it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
there,
That's
when
so
I was
someone
in
actually mentioned that. They're like, that's a Linder drink that you just got. I always get
Hey,
that. I'm like, hey man, it does taste good. Like
yeah, it
can't
tastes
knock me
good.
for it.
Yeah, you know
That's
what?
funny.
Like I'll work it off later when I play dodgeball,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I always try to like figure out how I can make fun of myself. When I was in SD, people always made fun of this app that it was actually Drew, my manager, who downloaded for us, but it was called Cluster, where a group of people can share photos like in a I mean GroupMe can do this, WhatsApp, any app can do this, but there happens to be one called Cluster that he found where all of a sudden I would just start taking pictures of people and highlighting, I don't know, even just our team at a happy hour, whatever it may be. And people said, Andy, stop posting on the damn Cluster. Like, no one cares. But it was fun. And, we got to visit the lynda.com studios in Santa Barbara as a team. And I like took a bunch of pictures. And I guess people may know I barely post like on Instagram ever or like Facebook or whatever, but this app like took over my life and I loved it. And yeah, when I was in New York, I would always go Wu Tang, and
Oh yeah.
KP, my old manager, always every time we talk, she always ends the call with Wu Tang. Or when I'm playing poker with friends, sometimes I'll make these weird noises with my mouth. But you know what? I feel comfortable and I can make fun of
Mm.
myself, and I guess hopefully people like that, and I can be self-deprecating. But no, yeah, no time to waste time. Like that's my philosophy. The quote that I always talk about from my summer camp growing up is, what I had, I gave. What I kept, I lost forever. So think about that one, Davidson. Think about what
Love
it means.
it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that on your LinkedIn profile, and I was like, I need more time to digest this quote. That's like this is like way too deep for me right now.
We love it. We love it.
Well, no, I mean, I honestly like I really appreciate you spending time to share, your insights and sort of like what, I think like some of the big takeaways I've gotten from our conversation is like just to be your true authentic self. And if you have like intentionality, whether it's like creating your own mission statement or personal statement, and being clear on like who you are as a human being, I think that will ultimately lead you to success. I think you know having a lot of different relationships that add different dimensions to you, that give you whether it's like um, hobbies or extracurriculars that will add to your life so that you're multidimensional, like will definitely help you in like just being your best self.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously like you're putting in the effort, you're putting in the time and energy. um, you're clearly making an impact. So yeah, man, thanks for everything that you do. And I actually really appreciate our conversations. I know like everyone's trying to get time on your calendar. So I appreciate you like still making time for me despite, you know, having so many like mentees and whatnot. So yeah, man, thanks for everything. I appreciate
Yeah. No, likewise, Davidson. I've learned so much from you over this past year. Can't believe it's already been 8, 9 months since you started at LinkedIn. It flies by. And we need that energy. We need the new mayor of NYC to take over.
it. Yeah, man, someone has to try. No one could be you, but we can all, there's a lot of people that can try to fill in the gaps, here and then.
Yeah, no, totally. Awesome.
Cool. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, of course. Talk to you soon.